Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today on the talk show, our discussion is going to be about the indirect and direct causes of residential schools and why they're historically significant. First off, direct causes of residential schools are European settlers in Canada felt their culture was far more superior than those who belonged to the Aboriginal culture. Why, you may ask? Well, the Europeans felt they had a better way of living because they knew money and business and thought themselves to be more civilized than the Aboriginals. Europeans also took on the judgment that Aboriginals were savage because of the way they lived, for example, hunting. Europeans thought education would be the perfect way to civilize the First Nations people. They knew young children who started practice of European culture would pass it down. I think the most important out of this is now Europeans felt they needed to civilize Aboriginals just because maybe they felt it was their job, so they took on that role. Although the end result didn't turn out as planned and was a cruel act as we can see today. Next up, direct consequences of residential schools. Many of the survivors of residential schools are scarred from horrible conditions that they were forced to live in. They were beaten, raped, and physically and verbally abused. This taught the school that it is not a fun learning environment which breaks the cycle in education. These survivors would be hesitant to send their kids to school nowadays because of the survivors' experience at the residential school. Some of these survivors ended up actually taking people to court, such as one case where survivors took the government and churches to court due to poor conditions of the schools. Both admitted to being guilty and agreed upon a settlement. Families were destroyed due to residential schools, along with Aboriginal culture. Some are still traumatized today from being taken from their families. These schools paved the way for the amount of domestic violence against women and children that we see today. I rank the domestic violence today as the most important because it's something we all hear regularly on the news, whether we choose to acknowledge it or not. Now on to indirect causes. The Europeans coming and settling in Canada. The Europeans did not come to Canada simply to send the Aboriginals to residential schools to try and civilize them. In fact, the Europeans sort of actually stumbled upon Canada in search for the Northwest Passage. The Aboriginals living a different lifestyle. Just by coincidence, the Aboriginals ended up living so different compared to the European culture, and when they were to live together, the Europeans did not agree and began residential schools. I think Europeans coming to Canada is the most important because it just shows how a chain of events can alter the future. And finally, indirect consequences. The way people view Aboriginals and the stereotype that they have today. People still discriminate against Aboriginals because of their past, as it is thought to be that they need to just get over it. Lots of people still don't understand the severity of the subject and how brutal and graphic it can be. It is important that people know how severe it is so that they can educate themselves and others before thinking to make another racist comment. Significantly in history, many of these consequences are what stands out. For example, when we talk about domestic violence, we commonly see it or hear it in the news with Aboriginal people, which just brings people to immediately make judgments that they're bad people, which is not true. This is an outcome of residential schools due to their poor living conditions, and the violence is a result of this. Also, people on their racist judgments towards those who are Aboriginal. This has been going on for many years, obviously, and still continues on today, simply because of the past. And I find it intriguing that the past alters the future in so many ways. Well, that's all today. Have a great day.